We light this chalice in the spirit of voices that must be heard, from east to west, from north to south. We cry out from Transylvania to the African continent, from Europe to the islands of the Philippines. We shall not be silent. Our voices must be heard. It is my great pleasure to introduce you to Reverend Carol Houston, who opened our annual gathering by speaking to us about engagement with global women's rights. Carol lives in New York City and spends much of her energy on international women's empowerment. She was IWC's first treasurer and second president, and has also served as the organization's vice president and board member. Since leaving the board of directors, Carol has remained active on several IWC committees, including the one focused on the U.S. Commission on the Status of Women. Carol Houston.
Thank you, Ade. I want you to imagine a big city, always crowded, but at this point crowded with groups of women with important work to do, with smiles on their faces, but also solid intention about what they want to do, moving around, going into meetings, coming out of meetings, standing in line, but always there to talk to each other about the future of women in the world, about women's empowerment. The meetings of the Commission on the Status of Women happen every March for 2 weeks in New York City, focusing on the UN, but on other venues as well. I, living in New York City, was somewhat aware of the way this worked and how crowded it was and how crowded the meetings were and how hard it was to get around and get into them. But our work was in national women's empowerment, and CSW was a place where we needed to be. Bruce Knotts and the UN office urged us to become involved in CSW. Carmen Capriles, whom we had gotten to know in Bolivia, also was very active around the UN, and she urged us to do the same. So in 2018 and 2019, small groups of us gathered to stick our toes into the CSW and see what it was like. In the first year, Phyllis Marsh and Betty Crowley came up from Annapolis and went with me to lots of events. We got to know Ellen Barfield, who also has deep interaction with the UN around veterans of peace. So I'm going to meetings, occasionally standing up and asking questions after panel discussions and getting an opportunity to mention the name of our organization to the gathered group. It's an enormous time, enormous numbers of people around. It's hard to feel your way into it, but we were beginning to feel our way into it. In 2019, July, we received status as an ECOSOC organization with the UN. ECOSOC is the Economic and Social Council of Civil Society. And a lot of organizations have this status with the UN, but it really was the open invitation to begin to become more involved with CSW, and we did. We began attending meetings of NGO CSW NYC, an organization that puts together workshops and panels. And we proposed a panel, and the panel was accepted. Dr. Rika would come in really excited. We put together a group of 10 or 12 women that were going to be around for that CSW, and that CSW was in 2020. CSW was canceled in mid-February. It was the first COVID-related cancellation that had a direct effect on me, and it was the moment that I said, oh, this is going to be bad. Canceled, except for about a 15-minute session at the UN, one of the official events. They did open the CSW and then adjourn it. So in a way, it happened in March of 2020. We did, in fact, have an International Women's Convocation CSW meeting in 2020. Carmen was already in the US before it was canceled. Linda Perkins, a women's studies teacher from the West Coast. And so 4 of us, Carmen, Linda, her student, and me, we met at a restaurant called Coogan's, which later closed, never to reopen. But we did have one IWC meeting in 2020. But then we said, okay, we'll see what's going to happen next year. We'll work on that, and we did. CSW 2021 was all virtual. The organization NCSW put together a platform that was capable of hosting hundreds of events, workshops, panels, an exhibit hall, interactive networking events. 25,000 people, mostly women, registered for that platform. And I will say the platform worked fairly well. It was possible to move around, to go from workshop to workshop, and we did that. We had a group of 16 women who attended events in CSW in 2021. We met 3 times a week to debrief on what we were attending and what we were doing. Again, it's an enormous operation, CSW is. It's hard to figure out how to get into it, but we are working on it. We had 3 parallel events. Jofi will tell you in her report how to find those. We have a written report of a lot of our delegates that went to events, and we'll talk about them. It's very exciting what is going on. There is another organization, another set of meetings, Gender Equality. They met in Mexico, again, virtually coming out of Mexico City. There's another meeting at the end of this month coming out of Paris. And we have about a half dozen women who are going to be engaged with that. If you're interested, let us know. And we will figure out if, I think we can still register more people to go to that event. You learn a lot. You go to meetings, you learn a lot. You network. It was easier to network when you were sitting next to each other in person, but it's still possible even on virtual platforms. I think next year will be a hybrid, will be both virtual and in person. We will be there. The committee that has come together around these meetings is getting into a pattern of meeting monthly, and you're invited to join us even if you haven't been to any of these events. The United Nations, the Commission on the Status of Women, it is where the work is being done on making women more empowered in the world for leadership, for climate change justice, for domestic violence prevention, all those things, and we are working on it. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. Jofi is monitoring that. This has not been comprehensive. I'll give it in just a few minutes for you here. But this is an important part of the work that IWC can do, of advocacy work we can do, and there's room for more of you to be part of that if you want to, and let us know if you want to be involved in that part of our work. So Jofi, are there any questions, or do you have a question?
Yes, I'm looking, hello everyone, I'm looking in the chat, and I do not see any questions at this point, so I think we can open it up. One question from the audience, if everybody, or a comment, if anybody wants to comment or ask a question. Carol, you were breaking up in the beginning, so we couldn't hear you very well, but then it got better, and then we could hear you, so I just wanted to let you know that we were.
Okay, well, then you probably heard the important part. I was sort of just trying to set the scene of at the beginning.
I understand. So if there are any comments or questions, if not, I don't see anyone raising a hand.
Well, let me then just reinforce what I said about gender equality. Gender equality is the secondary group. Trying to bring more young leadership, more specific short-term goal setting into the women's empowerment movement. The meeting in Paris, coming out of Paris at the end of the month, should be very interesting. Let us know if you want to be engaged in that, and you will be getting information about it as some of us go to that meeting. So, thank you.
Thank you, Carol. A lot of good stuff going on. Now, we will create a space to connect everyone in a dialogue to explore pathways towards gender equality. In 4 small breakout groups, we will unpack some of the inequalities that the pandemic has exposed and exacerbated, while giving you the opportunity to voice your ideas, your questions, and your concerns. Jofi has set up the 4 focus groups. Women and Climate Change, that's facilitated by Karen Korsh. Sexual and Reproductive Health Rights for Young Women, that's facilitated by Peg Swain. Women, Children, Immigration Justice, facilitated by Jan Meslin. Domestic Violence, The Shadow Pandemic, facilitated by Beth O'Connell. Now, Jofi will send everyone an invitation to allow you to join a focus group. Please be sure to join the group that you selected when you registered. We are allowing 20 to 25 minutes for the breakout sessions. And Jofi will send us all a reminder 5 minutes before the session ends. We will then reconvene for the group summaries.
And I sent a invitation to everyone to join a small breakout group. See you in about 20 to 25 minutes, everyone.
I'm not sure who will be reporting from our group, but it's now time for the representatives from the individual groups to report out their conversations in each individual groups that they were in.
Okay, yeah, I think our group, the climate change, women in climate change group was the first one on the list, so I can start. I'm Karen Korch, and I'm president of the board of IWC. We talked about climate change. Erin gave us Erin Beasley, who works for Ecosystem Restoration Camps. Talked to us about women in climate change. She gave us a great presentation about how she's working with farmers and people who plant in Mexico to increase regenerative practices so that we're able to farm, more efficiently and to have less negative impact on their environment. And she showed us some charts about the increases in carbon pollution, methane pollution. We've all heard a lot about, methane gases and how they're increasing. But the fossil fuel pollution is the major pollutant in our world. So she also talked about she showed us a chart of the different countries and how we're all changing. That China is increasing exponentially their greenhouse gas emissions and carbon emissions, and the United States and other more affluent countries are decreasing their some, but the per capita emissions are still the highest in the US and Russia. So she talked about how we need to shift the way energy is used and change the way land is used. And that's what she's doing in her current position. Using nature-based solutions that are being used in developing countries around the world. And she had a map showing the different countries around the world that are using these nature-based solutions. There are multiple solutions to issues. One of the things that we know is a big issue in many parts of the world is drought, and some strategies that can decrease the impact of a drought, such as increasing organic matter in the soil and other similar strategies can help decrease the impact of a drought for farmers and people growing their own food. And trying to use the local land knowledge, whatever knowledge people have in a certain locality, and incorporating that with whatever science that is available to build up strategies for having more regenerative farming practices. And then we opened up for questions and comments. And of course, we did not have a lot of time because time goes by when you're talking about such important stuff. So we talked about getting involved in local politics and thinking about international policies and politics that affect people the world around. So there's multiple strategies, and talking about how, most people around the world are focused just on making a living and feeding themselves. So we come from a place of privilege, thinking about all of these other things. So it's important to remember that when you're thinking about the environment and women and the environment. And of course, women are more disenfranchised than men are in general around the world. So that's an important thing to keep in mind too. So yeah, we had a good discussion, but like I said, we probably could have gone on for a lot longer because I'm sure a lot of people had thoughts that they weren't able to express as we ran out of time.
Thank you. Sounds like you guys got a lot done.
Okay, I'll go next. I was extremely privileged to be the moderator for the Sexual and Reproductive Health Rights Group. We had two wonderful presenters who in a very short period of time told us a great deal about what some of the issues are in their particular locations. Justyna from Poland and Noel from Kenya. So very distinct locations, and the bottom line literally seems to be in all of our situations, including other places where Unitarians are represented in this particular group here today is patriarchy. The P word was evoked quite a bit in terms of cultural practices and religious beliefs, which have significantly shaped responses, containment, and lack of rights for women in reproductive and sexual health. Justyna talked to us about the recent history in Poland since the 1989 revolution, when there was a great deal of hope that things would shift, things would change, and that didn't happen. Nearly to the degree that one had hoped, and to where now, fast forward to 2021, where there are literally protests in the streets over the total lack of access to abortion rights and extremely limited sexual and reproductive health options for women in Poland. Justyna evoked specifically the very predominant Catholic patriarchal culture that is shaping, continues to shape this response. In Kenya, Noel told us, and again, I'm very grateful for the intervention of Zofia, who Zofia provided the slides that Noel had prepared, and a wonderful presentation about the work and with Acacia in Kenya, a small Unitarian linked nonprofit organization that is doing extraordinary work in Kenya. And a point that, again, that I think should be acknowledged is that one of the most productive responses to patriarchal abuse and suppression is bring in the men, educate the men, and include the men in protests and in finding solutions. And again, this is work that is being highlighted by Acacia now as well. One of the aspects of sexual and reproductive health that is can be that is not acknowledged in many parts of the world is something that's now being labeled period poverty. In other words, the lack of menstrual health supplies and the impact of the need for education and supplies that has on women is severe and is a major effect in their lives. So I'm going to stop, but I want to thank our presenters again for very rich presentations and the reactions of our audience. Peggy cannot have provided a much better summary than I did. So thank you all. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll go. We were the immigration justice breakout, and Katia Hansen was our speaker. She's the president and CEO of URISE, Unitarian Universalist Refugee and Immigrant Services and Education. And she talked a little about how to get to the United States legally in the various ways, which are not many. But then we concentrated on the asylee, the asylum process, which is one of the legal ways to come to the US, because that's in the news so much right now down at the border, affecting women and children so much. And to become an asylee, this is a humanitarian-based immigration. You could either be a refugee or asylee. Refugees are assigned legally before they come. Asylees show up at the border, and the only way to seek asylum is to be at the border or in the US already. And so it is a legal way to come. And in order to get asylum or be a refugee, there are 5 reasons that you can be granted this: your race, your religion, your nationality, a membership in a particular group, or a political opinion. So then we talked about why these people are coming to the border. The main 2 reasons that you think of are widespread gangs. And just so you know, these gangs that are down in El Salvador and other places were started in the United States. Oftentimes the MS-13 gang was created in the United States, and these people got deported down there, and they have spread the problems down there, just as an example. Also, cultural attitudes and violence. And gender violence is oftentimes not even prosecuted down there, and LGBTQI violence especially also. is not prosecuted, and there's just lots of fear. And every 6 hours, a woman is murdered in the Northern Triangle, which is Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. There's also non-asylum based reasons people come: poverty, extreme poverty, family reunification, climate disruption. Those three do not give you asylum reason. You probably won't win asylum because it's not one of those 5 things I mentioned before. And we talked about Kamala Harris recently saying, don't come. And you probably have all heard this, and it was just heartbreaking to the immigrant community, because this is really the only way a person can come legally right now, if you are escaping these things, is to seek asylum and come to our borders. So it really, that's a very heartbreaking thing, partly because she did not acknowledge the United States is so, we caused a lot of the destabilizing factors down there, going back to the 50s. And several presidents since then, military-backed coups of these countries, and all for our own economic protections. And so we've caused a lot of the problems, and we should be at least recognizing those, and we should be welcoming people. So thank you very much.
I can say about the domestic violence breakout room, I'm sorry I was late. The email I had said that this session started at 5 o'clock in Paris, but apparently you all started earlier. So I had the wrong timing on my email. I can ask Elgiva perhaps to say a few words about what you all discussed in domestic violence.
Yes,
group?
Beth. Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
thank
Beth.
you. Thank you.
Okay. I just started off by telling us that, I'll just say in general what we were speaking, that especially during this pandemic and also on other regular times, there's a lot of violence happening all over. And the biggest problem that we have in India, and I know about our state, Meghalaya, is that this problem of violence against women and children is such a concealed and secret thing that family doesn't want to report it outside due to many reasons. So that is the reason why it is so difficult to control it, and which is causing a lot of distress and problems to the women and children, both in the cities and in the villages. So what we were discussing is that nowadays there's a lot of trafficking. It's on the rise due to this pandemic and on otherwise also. And this pandemic has made things worse by increasing these statistics of trafficking in many countries. And all these cases are very underreported. So what we were saying is in the solutions, we have, I shared the discussion with Gizella from Transylvania, and she has also done a lot of work there. So we have come to important points like, both countries and have hotline numbers which the women can call up at any time they have. And then there's a separate hotline for children also, where people can report for child abuse. And then we have awareness programs in our Sunday schools, which we have started with the kids when they are still young, on prevention of violence. And Gizella, and of course also in our schools, the government of India has started a curriculum for sexual education and prevention of violence in higher classes. Although Gizella point out that, there being a religious country, so it's very difficult to implement these things which are so required nowadays. And then these programs are also called safe space for children, which includes many programs for them to avoid being confronted by people who are violent. And we also have counselors in the schools, especially, and also in NGOs, various organizations where women and children can go and inform and complain about their cases. And Denise also, she mentioned that even the police have voiced aloud that, nowadays they are discouraging violent people from doing any crimes because they will find a lineup in the jails. So that is a very good thing to hear. And also we shared that there are shelters for women and children in many countries, although many of them may not be that active. Even in Meghalaya, our Women Commission right now is not functioning because of continuous lockdown. So these shelters are already in place, but some of them are not in operation. And just to add, we have some in the solution columns, we have something called Ring the Bell campaign, where people are encouraged to ring the doorbell whenever you hear any couple in the house fighting or any man beating the women and children. So the neighbors are encouraged to go out and ring the bell. So to tell those, just to discourage the perpetrators, that we are also listening and we know what is going on. That is one thing. And during this pandemic, there is also this campaign of Mass 19, which encourage the women to report in some specific places like a pharmacy or something, which keeps opening up during the lockdowns also. They can go and complain there secretly, as if they don't want to call up, because using the phone is very dangerous for the women in an abuse house. And also in the northeast of India, we have the women group called Fireflies. So these are the people who have shelters for women during these times. And yes, we agree that in all our violence prevention programs, we must include men. We must include men in all our programs. Without them, it's so difficult, because we don't want to do any program which is against them, because all the men are also encouraged to get involved in our problems, because this is everyone's issue. I'm sorry, Gizi, I did not catch that GPS tracking which you mentioned, which is something new for me. I don't know if you can help me with that little bit. Thank you from my side.
Okay, so if I want to talk about the progress in last 10 years, the electronic bracelet is really a big step. When a protection decision is issued, the observed person receives an electronic bracelet that shows the person's movement via GPS. It is tied to the police station, so the policeman can follow. And if the aggressor exceeds the prescribed limit, the system sends a direct alert to the police. So this is really a big step. And another one is the family doctors are required to note on a patient's record if they observe signs of any violence. It is important, because we talked about our country, it is a shame-based. Women have a shame-based attitude. It is rooted in religion, in religious education. Unitarians, of course, are not included in this category. So,
thank you, Gizi. Thank you for sharing. But just to summarize, I think we have moved ahead. We have moved ahead compared to the years that have gone by in the prevention of violence in our countries, I think. And that's a good move. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Big thank you to all of our wonderful presenters who shared their expertise and knowledge and insights with us, and to the facilitators who ensured that the participants learned a lot and were actively engaged in the dialogue. It's been a joy being with all of you today. Whether you are a member or not, please stay on for IWC's annual meeting. For those of you who are leaving us now, please take good care and connect with us through the wonderful variety of programs that IWC makes possible. Thank you so much for your participation.